So basically, this idea of we need to take Firebase seriously basically came along when I was recently looking for some people to work on one of our projects, and it seems that at least in Pakistan, very few people have actually considered this. And those who considered it basically looked at the basics to some extent, and then they decided that it's lacking some features, so they just moved back to the conventional way of making backends. Okay, so that's one thing. And the other thing is that I don't find a lot of companies actually using Firebase, and for that matter, not even Amazon Amplify or any backend as a service, for their projects. And majority of people are still stuck with PHP and MySQL, or making their own databases with Node, MongoDB, or whatever, which are great tools, by the way. I mean, this webinar is not at all intended to belittle those frameworks. They have their benefits. What I'm here for is to actually propose a faster way to build apps. So they can be mobile apps, they can be web apps, and they can be whatever you're thinking about for the past month or something. Okay, so what we will be covering in this webinar, we'll first look at the features of Firebase, then what Firebase can do for companies. Then if you are an individual working from 9 to 5, you have an idea in your mind that you want to materialize, but then you're thinking, this requires a lot of resources, it requires money, it requires a team of developers or things like that. We're going to see how this is going to help you, how Firebase can actually ease your life, and then some capabilities of Firebase. And then I'm going to try and see if we can squeeze everything in 1 hour, because we have about 60 minutes of total time, and then we'll have some answers and questions. And one more thing that I did not mention in this slide is the shortcomings of Firebase. So what are the limitations? So we're going to look at that too. Okay. So a little bit about myself. My name is Mohammed bin Yusrat. I've been, for the past 2 years, I've been working in a team where our main backend is Firebase. And I've been developing softwares for 200 years maybe. And but of course, the number of years don't really matter. What matters is what a person has been doing for all those years. So I have been somebody who was very, very reluctant in my team to start with Firebase. Okay. But I'll just give you guys a little bit of background about why we chose Firebase and what happened and how we were at the verge of giving up on Firebase, and then we said no, we'll continue with it, and how most of these things actually made a lot more sense to us later on. Okay. So 2 years ago, I met a friend of mine who started a company here in Rawalpindi, and we were discussing some of the projects that he was getting, and he said, we're going to go with native script and Firebase. And I said, oh, why not just some standard, Node, Express, MongoDB, or something like that? He said, because, because of the services Firebase offers. And he, mashallah, had like 20, 30 years of experience. And I was reluctant. But then when we actually got inside it, I realized why he actually insisted that we stick to Firebase. So what is Firebase in a nutshell? Okay. Firebase is basically backend as a service. Some of you guys might be very familiar with that term. And some others, for others this could just sound gibberish. But what backend as a service means, just like we have the SaaS model where we have this software as a service. So we use a software and we pay them. Okay. So for example, if you have WordPress, so you can either download WordPress and install it on your app, and of course that would be free, but you can also create a WordPress account and then you can use their services as, so you are not really installing anything, but you're basically just fiddling with their software. Okay. So what happened was that a lot of things, whenever you create a project, a lot of things were done redundantly. They were being done over and over and over again, and they were consuming time, and they were actually it was not feasible to reinvent the wheel. Now you guys will notice that this thing actually makes a lot more sense when we come to front end, because pretty much no one anymore writes vanilla JavaScript for their projects. We always go with things like Angular, we go with React, and we go with Vue, other such things, because of course it is going to make our life so much easy by replicating things that we have been doing for a pretty long time. Okay. So backend as a service is going to actually act kind of in the same way. Okay. So like for example, we have authentication. We mostly we would want some kind of authentication on our web apps or our websites, where we log users in, we register them. If they forget password, we send them passwords. And another thing is, there is generally some kind of database. Of course, pretty much always there is a database attached. And then there we have to write some kind of an API. If we are making something which is a single page app, you can say, which does not keep refreshing the page for every single action that the user performs. So all of these things, you will notice that they keep on repeating themselves. And this is where these things like Amazon Amplify or Firebase, they come in. And what we'll do is we'll just go through the features that Firebase has. And then for those of you who are currently working on some kind of a backend or some kind of framework, maybe some project that you have, you guys might be able to relate how this is going to actually make it a lot faster to take your app and convert it into a usable product. Okay. So first of all, I'm assuming all of you are developers or project managers. There is going to be a learning curve. We are going to have to adapt to newer things in Firebase. This is especially true for those who are coming from a PHP and MySQL background, because what happens is, majority of the times, the people who stop using Firebase, or for that matter any new software, what happens is they fail to understand the perspective that the developer of this new technology is trying to present. Okay. And it's basically more of a pain to change ourselves, and we end up saying, oh, this is useless, it is taking way too much time, so I will just stick to what I'm doing. What happens in these cases is that slowly and gradually older technologies fade away, and then if we stick to those things, what happens is those things are generally less performant. They're not really as quick to respond, and they're not scaling properly, or other any of such things. So it's always good as a developer to always welcome newer paradigms. Okay. One of the things that, I mean, of course, it doesn't apply to everybody, but one of the things that really scares developers away is moving to a new technology. Now, this is a little bit of annoyance, because, of course, every 6 months, every year, 2 years, 3 years, we see a technology revolution. Things change completely. You know, just nothing. You can't even tell that it's the same thing. So if we don't keep ourselves updated, that's a problem. And the first thing that actually causes this problem when you're coming to Firebase is their database. Okay. Other things, not so much, because authentication is pretty standard across, most of the frameworks. Everybody understands that we need a way to log in, we need a way to log out, things like that. But Firestore itself is, first of all, it is a NoSQL database. So what is a NoSQL database? It's kind of like a flat database. I mean, anybody who has worked with MongoDB understands that. But on top of being a NoSQL database, what Firebase does is that it limits all the queries that we make to binary tree. So it basically follows just the binary tree or halfway tree, whatever you want to call it. And data duplication is absolutely expected from you. Okay. So what happens is, people come with their PHP MySQL or MongoDB background, and then they say that, I want a query that links three tables within and themselves, and it reads 25 documents in one query, and this will be the most, you can say, efficient query that I've ever written. Oh, by the way, if whatever I say, any of these things sound gibberish to you, or I'm going a little bit fast, just feel free to write it in the chat, and inshallah I'm going to try and clarify this, whatever it is that could be problematic. So if we get ourselves, if we understand how binary tree search works, then my own estimation is that you can understand about 60% of the Firebase limitations, or how Firebase database works, how queries work. Most of those things will be demystified for you. The real issue with developers that happens with them is that they don't understand how binary search works. Okay. So they want to, for example, there is a document and you want to, it's a document of users, and you've stored both usernames in the same field, so maybe a full name field or something, and then you want to substring search for the substring of the second name or the first name, and you say, oh, Firebase doesn't support it because it won't. They would immediately say, oh, how come Firebase cannot support such a basic functionality? I mean, how can I even live with this kind of thing, and how would my app actually work with this? So this is a little bit of a homework, you can say. Something that you would take away from this webinar is that everything else that I say afterwards will make a lot more sense even if you don't understand binary trees. But when you actually sit down and start developing your app using Firebase, I would really encourage you to take some time, go to YouTube. I mean, if you don't understand it, I presume most of you would have some idea. But if somebody doesn't understand how binary search works, then take your time, learn it, and then dive into Firebase. I'm just going to summarize what binary tree does, and then we'll move on from here. So for example, you have 50 users. Okay, let's say you are storing just their first name in a table. We can imagine MySQL, something like that. And you want to look for a user. Okay, or maybe there are first and second names. And when you are looking for, when you're querying for a user in MySQL, what you're doing is you are putting select star from users, and then you are, for example, putting like, and then those two percent signs, and then you enter the substring that you want to search. What's going to happen on a lower level is that MySQL or whatever database that supports full text search is going to read all of the documents. It's going to go from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to the last one, and it will open that document. It will compare your text to see if it exists inside of it or not, and then if it doesn't, then it doesn't count it, and it goes till the end. Okay, this is how the standard databases would work, like on a lower level, of course. On any database that has binary tree, we don't work like that. First of all of the data is whatever data that we have indexed. Now this is another term here that you'll get used to as we go forward with the course. Whatever data we have indexed will always be sorted. So if you have 500 users and you have indexed them, their names will always be from A, B, C, and then till the last one. Okay, so suppose you want to look for somebody whose name is uh, Armughan, okay, or Aslam. So, so Aslam is the name that you want to look for. What happens is that in binary search, it is going to split the whole thing into half. Instead of reading all the documents, it goes to M. M is the middle of the dictionary, and it sees whether the first character of what you're looking for is behind or ahead of the cursor. If it's behind, so Aslam is A, which is the first one, it just splits the rest half, and anything from M to Z is just basically not even considered anymore. Okay, and then it goes back, um, and then it looks for it splits the rest of the remaining names into half, and then it keeps doing that, and in about 8 steps it reaches the name that we are looking for. Now these 8 steps are basically the same for a billion documents also, or a trillion documents for that matter. Okay, so our database will not read 500,000 usernames to find something, but it will be splitting them half and half and half, and in about 8 steps we will be where we are, where we want to be. Okay, so this is one of the benefits which comes with its limitations, of course, because you can only look for when you're querying something, you can look for the way the string starts, but there are workarounds that we can apply to fit our own needs, but this is basically the gist of it. Okay, so now if you have a database that already has binary search, why would you still want Firestore, right? Well, because of triggers and storage rules. So this is another feature of Firebase that basically what a trigger does is, for example, you tell Firebase that whenever a document is added, whenever a new user is added to my users table, so tables are basically collections in Firebase land, so we call them collections, and so we can set a trigger whenever a document is added, then perform these actions. Okay, so this really gives you a lot of power for managing how you are going to manage your whole database. And then there are storage rules. So for example, in users, you want to specify a rule that this trigger, this particular collection should be accessed only by someone who has a user ID that matches their user ID in this. So basically, to the really lowest level, you can put a security, and then you can really relax that the developer is not going to be able to mess this thing up. Okay, so uh, okay, so Salman Sab is saying that triggers are in every RDBMS. Sure, sure. But then in security rules and triggers, when you bring them both together, you get something that is just, mostly phenomenal for most use cases. Of course, there are use cases which will not fit correctly with this particular uh, approach, but you can see that just by working around a few things, you can actually have something that would let you manipulate your app much faster. So the first thing to take away from here is that you will be forced to use binary tree search for your document, and then if you understand how that thing works, then you can just understand all the limitations and other things that Firebase has. Okay, so next, Firebase for companies. This is actually there are a lot of things in which there are a lot of ways in which Firebase can speed up productivity. One of the examples is, so you have a team for doing backend development, you have a team for doing front end development. They are going to spend their time, they're going to spend their energies into trying to make things secure, into, of course, will be using frameworks, that is understandable. But suppose they are making their own so for example, they are making their own backends, or their own database, their own admin panels, their own things like that. What's going to happen is the backend team will be a separate team. And another problem is for the project manager, that it will not be easy to find out the security holes that were left in it just by mistake. Of course, a lot of you guys must be using end-to-end tests and unit tests and things like that, which may seem that it's going to make things a bit more secure. But again, security is one of the biggest problems that you're gonna be facing. Okay, so the way we any company who's managing their project can actually solve this problem in Firebase, especially if they're concerned about security. Also, they maybe got hacked once or twice, three times. And of course, in companies, if you guys have, if anybody has been a recruiter here, you'll realize that most developers mostly stay in a company for 2 years, maybe 3 years. Whenever you join a new company, your peers will be, mostly their experience will be 1 year, 2 year, 3 year. What happens is when you keep on changing the developer cycle, you really, or the developers are coming and they're going, it is not easy to identify who takes security easily, okay, like seriously. It is not easy to identify which person would make a mistake that's just terrible. It's not easy to identify whether somebody understands SQL injection or not. It is not easy to tell right away, about what their understanding of security is. You know, so what we can do with Firebase is we can set up security rules and then forget about it. So security rules is probably going to be a file that is like 50 lines. And for example, we are going to say that only authenticated user, a logged in user, should be able to access. Suppose we are working on a website which is like OLX, okay, and we say, okay, we just want authenticated users to be able to access the ads, and we want premium users to access to post ads which are advertised or promoted. What I will do is I will just define the rules and I'll leave it on the developer, and I'll tell him, I'll restrict him, do not change the rules, just do whatever else you want to do. So what's going to happen is, whenever they try to attempt to do something which is a little bit problematic or which could be an issue with the security, they just simply won't be able to do it, because they will keep on getting security errors, and then they'll have to find their way around those things. And you can from one place you can tell whether your app is secure or not, which are the security rules. And this is a big deal. If you have worked on a project that has 600 JavaScript files or 500 PHP files all working with one another, there could be some possibilities where things got overlooked, you did not look carefully, and what happened was that somebody took advantage of it and your app got hacked. Okay, so this is how a company basically can make advantage and put most of their human resource to just doing tweaking the front end. Okay, and then after this, when we have the security rules set up, then it really is the matter of setting up the front end in most cases. So somebody is using React, someone is using Vue or Angular or anything like that. What happens is they would just start writing, and they would know that the API is there, and they would simply begin querying things and begin making the user interface right from the start. Okay, now I know this can happen from the by using mock data also, but again, performance and other such issues, they could have a little bit of a problem. So Firebase is really going to speed up the development for you. And let's look at some of the features, the things that Firebase offers. First of all, there is the API is a little bit of unopinionated, because it matches a lot with the Amazon API, Amplify API, in many ways. But of course, in Amazon you have to, it's a little bit more complex and requires a little bit more work in setting things up if you compare that with Firebase. So, but if you understand Amplify, you should be comfortable with Firebase also, because it's a lot simpler. And the second thing is the security rules. Again, being able to set a rule for every single field, for every single item in your database, or for collections or patterns of collections, how this whole collection is going to behave if unauthenticated user comes, who can modify a particular document in the database, who can update it, who can add it. So really you have a really good control on the things that you can do in the database. And after that, we have storage, of course, storage buckets. We have a database that we've been talking about for the last 30 minutes. We have storage buckets, of course, where we can upload users files and we can take advantage of the same security rules. Okay, so one certain file, JPEG or an MP3 or a video was uploaded by somebody, we say no, what we want to do is we would want these files to be accessible by authenticated users, and other files that we want that should be accessed by maybe public. Okay, so that can be done. We have a storage bucket also. Then we have another amazing thing with most of the Firebase APIs, and this is something that I really want you guys to consider, and that is the offline first API. Now, there might be something out there already, not that I know of course, but in my own experience, Firebase API was the first one that I came across that has its own local storage within the browser. So basically, you can think of it like mini SQL or something. What happens is whenever you attempt to make a change in your database, you don't add a spinner, you don't show them loading, you don't show them something is happening. Whenever you commit a change, whenever you say, okay, go ahead and update the user's points to 5,000, it happens immediately. How? What it does is it basically it takes the change that you want, it puts it in a temporary kind of database, okay, like SQLite, you guys might be using it, and it updates the view for the user. So whether they are on Android, they are on iOS, they are inside maybe Angular website, web app or something, you tell it, okay, change users points to this. Okay. What happens is that Firebase basically stores that change and updates the view for that user as if it just happened. And this change actually persists across all of the tabs. So maybe you have like 10 tabs open and Firebase is going to update all of them, although nothing has actually changed in your database in the cloud. But then after it has updated the view, it is going to simply change, make an attempt to change the database, and that is going to happen in the background. And then afterwards, what happens is it gets updated. So the experience that you give to the user is almost like working offline. Okay, they won't even know that something is happening, and we are actually trying to access something. So what I was saying was that the offline first API is really good. Okay, what it does is it basically takes your changes, puts them into a temporary database that is running inside the user's browser or on their mobile device. It updates the view. For example, there is a list where you are adding a, maybe you have a to-do list where you want to add an action, maybe add some item. It will just update everything that is there, like as if you actually changed everything in the database. Okay, and then what it is going to do is in the background it is going to update the database itself. Now why does this happen? Basically the philosophy of Firebase is don't make users wait, don't make 97% of users wait for the bad internet connection that just 3% users will have. So we presume that majority of users will be having a good internet connection. And by the way, this offline first actually works even if you are in airplane mode. So maybe you were taking a flight from Pakistan to Dubai or somewhere Saudi, wherever you were going, and you took off, and you have a mobile app in your phone that is working on something which is built on Firebase. Maybe it's a notes app, something like this. And you took off and you put your phone in airplane mode. You made lots of changes, and the view constantly was updated. You thought it was all happening. The moment you landed, you reached the place where you wanted to go. You turn on Wi-Fi or bought a SIM card, whatever. It is just going to make the changes to the database. It is just going to commit them. This is something that has really amazed me because of the experience that I can give my users. It's really, nothing comes even closer to this. The snappiness of your app. Okay. Um, so we can talk about offline first all day, but let's just uh, move on. We have analytics in Firebase. They come out of the box. On web, you just have to write one line to enable analytics. Just write it out, copy paste it from GitHub, whatever you do, and forget about it. Just fire and forget. Next, after a few days, come back, go to analytics tab. You will see the map where your users are coming from, which browser they're using, how are they interacting with your app, and things like that. So analytics is actually very deep. Of course, we can't go into the depth within this 1 hour that we have. Next, we have crash reporting, and crash reporting is actually specific to the mobile apps. So, for example, you have an iOS app, you have an Android app, and it crashes for some device that nobody owns, but you still want to know. Okay. So, what happens is that if you're not using Firebase, you will just keep on getting negative reviews on Play Store, okay, or the App Store, where people say, oh, it fails, oh, it crashes, it crashed on first launch, and then the rating goes down and you are upset, like, how do I know where is this actually crashing? I don't even know how to replicate the crash. So what crash reporting does, it tells you the exact device that they were using, specific, it pinpoints it, and it says this is the exact. So maybe Q mobile something phone that doesn't launch it properly because their Android version is 5 years old. Okay, so crash reporting is again a huge lifesaver. Next thing is cloud messaging, which cloud messaging, FCM, is basically, it can be used for notifications, yes, but originally it's a way for you to communicate from server to your user. Okay, so what we do is we are able to trigger a change. So for example, okay, somebody posts a funny picture, and we have a website which has infinite scroll, which just something like Instagram, you can think, and we want a notification to go to everybody. What we use Firebase cloud messaging. So every time a device gets registered with our project, it is given a unique identifier. We take that identifier, we store it in Firestore or something, and then when we are ready to send them a notification, we use their ID, and then we simply um, dispatch, just like event emitter, like in JavaScript, something like that. And those devices are going to get an object which will contain some payload, so some data. Maybe we want to say new item added is the title of the notification. We can even have a path to the image that they added. Lots of things we can add. And then on the device, we can actually decide to send them a notification, or if they are actually using that app, then maybe not send them a notification, and then perhaps just show them a small icon somewhere that 5 new posts were made or something like that. So so this actually allows you to communicate from the backend, from the Firebase console to your users. So this can be done by programmatically, and this can also be done by just using the console. So maybe you don't want to set up a software, you don't want to set up a script or a cloud function for this. You just want that I want to occasionally be able to communicate with my users. Okay. So what you do is you go ahead and create a new notification. Somebody who doesn't know programming of any sort, no problem. Just go to Firebase Cloud Messaging, start a new one, and that's it. You'll be able to send messages to all of your users. And of course, you don't always have to save the device IDs for everybody. You can actually just create topics and subscribe your users to topics, and which can be, you can think of them as categories of notifications. And in those topics, whoever has subscribed to a specific topic will just get all of those notifications. Okay. And yes, the last thing that I want to cover in this small webinar is the real-time change detection in database. So those of you who have worked with Angular know that there is going to be, there is mostly a front end, and then there is like the template, and then there is TypeScript. Okay, so you make some changes in the template, they get updated in your TypeScript if you have some change detector going on there, or you make a change in the TypeScript and it just magically changes in the view also. Okay, so those of you who are aware with this will actually understand this better, but the way it works in short is you can actually subscribe to any field in the database. Okay, let's say a user's points are increasing, so you can subscribe to it using observables, and whenever anywhere from anywhere in the world makes a change to your cloud Firestore, this person who was subscribed, who was just looking at a screen, gets updated. So let's, for example, you're creating an app in which you are going to show the latest cricket scores of some Pakistani match. Okay, now traditionally this was not easy. I don't know, maybe there are some frameworks, other frameworks beside this that are doing. I mean, even in Amazon Amplify, it's not a straight black and white thing. You have to do a lot of setup. But suppose you're making an app where you show users your scores. So Pakistan has this much scores, and South Africa has this much score, and they've lost this many wickets, whatever the scoreboard is. But you don't want the client to constantly contact server, look for changes, and come back and update the view. So what we do is on Firebase, we just subscribe to changes in a specific document. So the user is sitting, and every single time something changes in the database, they will just see it almost immediately without polling the server again and again. So again, really, I just want to clarify this, that the whole purpose of this webinar is to explain the capabilities of Firebase. Of course, we can't just go to the nitty-gritty details because 1 hour is simply not enough for that. But what I really want everybody to take away from this webinar is what exactly is possible with Firebase, so that the next time they want to choose a technology for their project, they know that okay, there is this Firebase thing out there that can actually do these things for us. Okay, Firebase for individuals. So you are a developer working 9 to 5, you're really busy, you have an idea in your mind that you want to monetize, you want to make an app out of that idea, but you're thinking, oh, I'm going to need a team, I'm going to need somebody else to work with me. And mostly the way this process will go is going to be something like this. So you get a friend and you tell them, okay, you work on the back end, I will work on front end. But of course, you have a job to take care of, you can't pay that much attention. After a month, that guy says, okay, back end is done, front end is done, let's connect them. And then, you know, really you're like, oh, we just wasted such a long time. So how does Firebase solve this problem? Because it takes away writing backend. Okay, so everything you're doing is like in the ideal case, of course. By the way, just I wanted to mention here is that you can actually write backend, which is called cloud functions in Firebase. But mostly the things that people do with cloud functions can be done without cloud functions also. So that's something to keep in mind while we are doing this. And okay, so how do we start? How much would this cost? You can begin your project free of cost always. Okay, you don't even have to enter your card. So again, on Amazon, Amplify, or any AWS service, you cannot create an account without entering your payment details. On Firebase, you can start absolutely free. If you enter your payment details, they will give you, most people, they mostly they give about $300 for a year. So you can really play around with all of the services. And by the way, this solves the scaling issue that like all of us would have to face if our app is actually successful. This is really important. Suppose you started off, you made an app, you put it on a shared hosting, everybody was liking it. Suddenly, this actually happened to me actually about, I don't know, 15 years ago. There was an Us magazine that somehow managed to print a small website that I had made, because back then there was no YouTube, no Facebook. So what happened was that they just printed it. And my free web host, of course, could not scale up. And a lot of people came. And in the evening, when I saw the site, it says, "Oh, you've used up too many resources, so we are shutting you down." Okay. What Firebase does is it uses some kind of clusters. So if you know Kubernetes, or if you know how Docker works, what they basically do, the moment more users come to your app or your website, they will simply fire up more instances to host your app. And they will never, your users will never experience a slow response time, because they will keep on multiplying it immediately, like on in real time. And what's going to happen is they are basically the moment that load reduces, those extra nodes are going to be turned off themselves, and you will only be charged for the extra amount of computing you used, for the while you had that swarm of users who came to your website. And mostly the free tier is actually enough. I mean, for one of our clients, I remember just 3-4 days ago, I saw that they had about 1 million document reads in a month, and their bill was €1. Okay, so this is actually pretty good for them. Okay, now if you are already are working on some framework or something, you're wondering whether that supports Firebase or not. So Firebase API is available pretty much everywhere you can think of. Of course, all the JavaScript, TypeScript frameworks, Go, Angular, React, Vue, Svelte, everything. And on Android, iOS, for the native Kotlin, Java, for your iOS, Swift, or Objective-C or whatever. It's available everywhere. It's even available uh, for the hybrid frameworks. So Flutter, React Native, NativeScript, everything. And it doesn't stop there, it goes ahead, and it's actually available even for C++, it's available for Unity. Some of you might be game developers, and it's even available for Arduino, which is strange enough for this. And by the way, Firebase is actually available for PHP also. Although, I mean, of course, I can't think of why anybody would use it for PHP, but it is actually available for PHP also. So, okay, the last thing, limitations. What are the limitations of Firebase? This is something really important. First thing is you are dependent on Google. So now this could be a good or bad thing, of course. Some people would be happy that we are putting a dependency on Google because Google won't just pull the plug right away like this. But it could be a bad thing also, because some people would want to be completely independent, to be able to move their app wherever they want to do. So this is a little bit of a problem. Another thing is the Firestore, the database that they have. It's not easy to take your current structure of program, current structure of web app, and just deploy it on Firebase. So if it's MongoDB or something else, something along those lines, it's not a trivial task to just simply plug in your existing project and start using. This is going to require some work. Of course, if you're starting from scratch, that's not a problem. The second limitation is, in my personal opinion, a good thing, but mostly it will not be a good thing for most developers, because they will say it's too much work. And that's the forced binary search that I talked about. I already elaborated that. For example, you won't be able to search within document text. So there is a document that is an essay and you want to see if it contains a particular word. You'll have to create an index for that. More on that you can read the API docs. And the biggest problem for me is the no kill switch. So you messed something up in the way that it was causing so many document reads and your bill was going up and you were sleeping. You can't configure it to stop propagating everything or stop hosting users when your bill reaches, say, $50 or $100. It can give you alerts that, okay, your bill has reached this much, but it's not going to just kill it. So this happened with one startup, I think a year, 2 years ago, that they woke up with a $30,000 bill. Why? Because overnight their site got 2 million active users. And Firebase did not slow down for them. It just kept working. And well, Firebase actually paid them back, these Google guys. But this is something to understand, that you'll have to be very careful when you write your code, so you don't mess up. Okay, that's it. If you guys have any question, please feel free to ask. And we have 5 more minutes.
A few of the
And I'll
guys
be able to
posted
clarify.
a few comments on the chat.
Okay.
If you'll be able to see them and
Yes,
answer
yes,
them,
yes, yes.
that'd be great.
Okay, FCM, GCM, we already covered on that. Firestore is real-time database in simple words. Well, there are actually two databases. One is actually called real-time database, and mostly that is referred to as DB. We just call it DB. Okay. And the other thing is Cloud Firestore, which has a little bit more um, powerful queries that you can use. But at the end of the day, it's still going to be binary search, so don't think too much. Don't expect too much from it. Okay. Why Firebase is called real-time database? No, basically that's just a database inside of it that's called real-time database. And that's actually deprecated, by the way. So don't use real-time database anymore. If you're going to start a new project, use Cloud Firestore. Okay, can we export all the data from Firestore and load it to MongoDB if someone needs to switch from Firestore to custom backend? Okay, this is actually a very good question. Uh, Theoretically, yes, you can. You can actually even you can uh, automate it so that it happens on weekly basis or something. It is possible, but it will not be a simple plug and play. So you won't say, okay, I've got all of my data and let's just switch to MongoDB. That won't happen. You'll have some kind of fiddling around. You'll have to change the way things are happening, and then you'll be able to use MongoDB. But for the most part, I don't think this is going to be necessary. Firebase also provides free web hosting. You can deploy your Angular app from Firebase to Firebase. Yes, this is correct. Is it a good idea to shift an existing PHP project to Firebase? Okay, this is a very good question. It actually depends. So then Albai, this is basically if your app is growing, you have only two options. One is that you set up some kind of orchestration setup on your server, but of course one server won't be enough. It is going to definitely cost you more than Firebase to set up some kind of scaling, and more in terms of money and in terms of time and in terms of work also. So on Firebase, this is actually one of the things that really people need to consider, is that everything scales automatically. You can sleep and know that your app will scale up. Okay, so in my personal opinion, if the project is actually in the beginning, just go ahead by all means, see the limitations of Firebase, see how things are working. Firebase is actually going to force you to do a lot of things in a completely different way than what you have been used to. So for example, you get a user and you want to see how many points that user has somewhere in some other database. So you are just going to kind of link them together, join them. Well, in Firebase, you're going to duplicate that data into their record. So a user has comments, and that comment itself is going to store the user's name. And then you're going to be like, oh, how do we update it? Well, then you'll use triggers to do that. So things are going to be a little bit different in terms of perspective, but for performance, if you follow the SOPs, the performance is never going to be anything that you can ever complain about. Yes, exactly. That's the point. If your application is in the beginning phase and you haven't done much, you might want to take some tutorials. I'm actually making some tutorials on my own YouTube channel, so you can just look for them. And if that works, sure enough, by all means, I would suggest that you go for it. I don't see this thing actually I don't think they're going to pull its plug like that. Even if they do, they're probably going to give you a year or more to pull the plug. But Firebase is really investing a lot. I personally received a phone call from Google that they're giving me this much money for the next year, like in Firebase credit, of course, so that I keep using it, because they're noticing that I'm creating projects and things like that. So I don't think they have any plans of killing this anytime soon. So I think this is pretty much it. I hope this was helpful for some of you. This was actually being recorded, so you guys can actually watch it later on also, no problem. Rahil bhai has probably recorded it, so it will be on YouTube. You can watch it again if you want. And I think that's it from my side.